1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. And happy Pride Month. Buckle up, because today I'm taking you on a brief but powerful journey through LGBTQ plus history in the United States. Did you know that back in 1966, it was actually illegal in New York to serve alcohol to anyone perceived to be gay? That law gave authorities broad power to harass queer people and shut down bars that served as safe spaces for the community. A few years later, in 1962, Illinois became the first state to decriminalize homosexuality by repealing its sodomy laws, a quiet but crucial step forward. On June 28, 1970, what we now recognize as the very first Pride Parade took place. Thousands of activists marched through Manhattan to mark the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall uprising, a pivotal moment I'll get to in just a bit. What started as a defiant act of remembrance has blossomed into a month-long celebration of identity, resilience, and community. In the United States, June became nationally recognized as Pride Month in the year 2000, when President Bill Clinton officially declared it Gay and Lesbian Pride Month. Then, in 2009, President Barack Obama expanded the recognition, proclaiming June as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month, honoring the full spectrum of the LGBTQ identities. It's important to note not every country celebrates Pride in June. Some nations mark it at different times of the year, and in many places, the fight for visibility and rights is still ongoing. But here in the United States, June is a time to reflect, uplift, and celebrate the progress made and recommit to the work still ahead. As I mentioned earlier, up until 1966, it was illegal in New York to serve alcohol to anyone identifying as homosexual. But even after the law was overturned, same-sex relationships were still criminalized. Just to be clear, acts like kissing, holding hands, or even dancing with someone of the same sex could get you arrested. So police found other ways to continue harassing patrons of gay bars and clubs, often through routine and violent raids. One of those clubs was the Stonewall Inn, a mafia-owned, well-known gay bar located in New York City's Greenwich Village. Quick rundown on the Stonewall. It was owned by the Genovese crime family, who regularly paid off the police to look the other way. The place itself was far from glamorous. To keep profits high, the owners cut a lot of corners. There was no fire exit, no running water behind the bar to clean glasses. The bathrooms were often filthy and frequently overflowing. And still, it was a refuge. Stonewall was one of the only clubs that welcomed drag queens, transgender people, homeless queer youth, and allowed same-sex dancing. For many in the LGBTQ plus community, it was one of the few places they could be themselves. With use of their bribes to law enforcement, the owners of the Stonewall Inn were usually tipped off before a police raid. That heads up gave them just enough time to stash the alcohol, sold without a license, and shut down any other illegal activity going on inside. But in the early hours of June 28, 1969, just after 1 a.m., that warning never came. Police entered the bar with a warrant and wasted no time roughing up the patrons. 13 people were arrested, charged with bootlegging alcohol and violating what was known as the 3-article rule. Oh, I haven't told you about that one yet. At the time, it was considered illegal, even though there wasn't any actual law, for a person not to wear at least 3 pieces of clothing that aligned with their birth-assigned gender. It was one of the many ways queer and trans people were criminalized just for existing. During the arrests, a lesbian was struck over the head by an officer as he tried to force her into a police van. She called out for help, and the crowd, nearly 400 strong, answered. Usually, when bars were raided, people scattered. But this night was different. This time, the crowd fought back, throwing coins, bottles, bricks, anything they could find. The police were pushed back into the bar and ended up barricading themselves inside. Reinforcements were called, but before they could arrive, the barricade was broken and someone set the bar on fire. Firefighters and police eventually showed up in time to extinguish the flames. By around 4 a.m., the crowd began to disperse, but the fight wasn't over. That very evening, thousands of people returned to protest the ongoing mistreatment of the LGBTQ community. The rebellion continued for 5 nights, becoming a turning point in queer liberation history. Now, let's fast forward back to the year 2000, when Vermont broke new ground by becoming the first state to legalize civil unions and recognize registered partnerships between same-sex couples. Then came a major milestone in 2004. Massachusetts became the first state to fully recognize same-sex marriage. And finally, in 2015, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Obergefell versus Hodges, making marriage equality the law of the land in all 50 states. While Pride is a time for celebration, it's also a time of remembrance. We can't forget the discrimination, violence, and hate the LGBTQ+ community has faced and still faces. There was the brutal torture and murder of college student Matthew Shepard in 1998, the devastating Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando in 2016 that claimed 49 lives, and the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs in 2022, another sanctuary violated. These are just a few of the most publicized tragedies. But the truth is, there are countless more stories, less covered, but just as painful. The LGBTQ+ community has endured judgment, rejection, and systemic harm from neighbors, schools, the legal systems, politicians, and society at large. So why am I bringing this up? This is a domestic violence podcast, after all. Because I want you to imagine what it's like to walk through the world every day believing that it hates you. And then when you finally make it home, seeking refuge, you're met by someone even more dangerous, the person who promised to love you. For many, that's not a metaphor, it's reality. Now, let me get into some specific facts about the LGBTQ+ community and domestic violence. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, intimate partner violence, or IPV, impacts LGBTQ+ individuals at alarmingly high rates. 43.8% of lesbian women and a staggering 61.1% of bisexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. That's compared to 35% of heterosexual women. Among men, 26% of gay men and 37.3% of bisexual men report similar experiences, compared to 29% of heterosexual men. Yet despite these high numbers, fewer than 5% of LGBTQ+ survivors in 2012 attempted to obtain protective orders. So why aren't more survivors seeking help? Because while the abusive tactics may be similar across all relationships, LGBTQ+ survivors face unique barriers. One of the most devastating is the threat of being outed by an abuser to family, coworkers, or the public. For many, that threat alone is enough to keep them silent. Add to that a history of trauma, bullying, discrimination, hate crimes, and it's easy to see why asking for help can feel impossible. Imagine being gaslit, not just by your partner, but by society itself. Being told you're unstable, immoral, or a monster. How do you trust your own reality? How do you trust that anyone will believe you? And for transgender victims, the risks are even higher. They're more likely to face harassment, intimidation, and threats, not just from partners, but sometimes from the very systems meant to protect them. Prejudice, misinformation, and a lack of LGBTQ+ understanding still shape how these cases are handled. And then there's a practical side. Fewer shelters and fewer resources that are truly LGBTQ+ friendly. All of this creates a dangerous silence. One we need to break together. In honor of the LGBTQ+ community, I'm dedicating as many episodes as possible this month to sharing stories from LGBTQ+ survivors of domestic violence. If you or someone you know has experienced domestic violence in an LGBTQ+ relationship and would like to share your story publicly or anonymously, please email me at onein3podcast@gmail.com. That's the number 3 podcast@gmail.com. Your voices matter, and your privacy will always be respected. Let's stand together, amplify each other, and make space for healing. Thank you for listening. Sources for today's episode can be found in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website onein3podcast.com. That's the number 3 podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.